That is such a blessed song. Think about the final stanza to the words to Amazing Grace. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we had just begun. That's a glorious promise that is made to you and to me. However, while we are on this earth, it is not uncommon for people of faith to feel isolated or severely outnumbered. When it comes to living for God in your workplace, in your extended family, in your school, the Bible may seem overwhelming when it tells us something. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8. Read it with me. Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. When you are walking through your daily life, be aware Satan is looking for somebody that he can devour. But it gets even worse. Go to Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 12. Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 12. Read it with me. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. Satan is looking for whom he may devour. Our battle is not only with Satan, it's also with evil forces. And not only that, it gets worse. 1 John chapter 5 and verse 19. 1 John chapter 5 and verse 19. When the pages quit, everybody got there. 1 John chapter 5, verse 19. We know that we are of God, and the whole world lies under the sway of the wicked one. So what is our contest really against? Our contest is against Satan. Our contest is against heavenly powers, evil heavenly powers. And the entire world is under Satan's control. Do you like our odds? Doesn't look real good, but there's some things that we can't see right now. So go to 2 Kings chapter 6. 2 Kings chapter 6. Second Kings chapter 6. You see, the king of Syria had been looking for Elisha for a long time. Why? Because he wanted to do him harm. 2 Kings chapter 6 and verse 13. So he said, go and see where he is, that I may send and get him. Doesn't look good. And it was told to him, surely he is in Dothan. And when he eventually discovered where Elisha lived, he encircled the entire city. You see, Elisha had an attendant, and that attendant went outside early in the morning. And he was startled to see that foreign armies had surrounded the entire city. And he said to Elisha, what shall we do? He asked the question that we too frequently ask. when we feel isolated or outnumbered in our job, in our school, in our neighborhood. Now, let's read 2 Kings chapter 6, 14 to 16. Therefore, he sent horses and chariots and a great army there. And they came by night and surrounded the city. And when the servant of man of God arose early and went out, there was an army surrounding the city with horses and chariots. And his servant said to him, Alas, my master, what shall we do? So he answered, Do not fear, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them. Hold on. Picture this in your mind. How many are there? Elisha and his helper, his servant, right? He wakes up early in the morning. He goes outside and he looks. And the entire city is surrounded by an army. Sorry, this sounds like a Marine Corps joke. Because you look around and you go, hey, wait a minute, there's a whole bunch of them and two less. This is probably not going to go well. So then Elisha said a prayer to God so that he would be merciful to Elisha's attendant and allow him to see the situation as it truly was. You're in 2 Kings. Let's read chapter 6 and verse 17. And then Elisha prayed and said, Lord, I pray, open his eyes that he may see. Then the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw. And behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. Wow, I'm liking the odds a little better now. Looks a little better. You see, the truth is that Elisha and us, we're not outnumbered by the enemies of God. Rather, we are reinforced by vastly superior forces. You see, what do we see when we look at the world around us? Jesus reminds us that if we're simply counting the number of people who choose the narrow way, we're always going to be outnumbered. Go to Matthew chapter 7 and verse 13. Matthew chapter 7 and verse 13. Matthew chapter 7 and verse 13. We'll read 13 and 14. Enter by the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the way that leads to destruction, and there are many who go in by it. Because narrow is the gate and difficult is the way which leads to life, and there are few who find it. What does that mean? That means that we're always going to be outnumbered here on earth. That means that we will never be the largest church in the city or the state or the country or the province. We're going to always be few if we are truly seeking God's way in our life. You see, the leading men among the Jews in Rome said that they had all heard about the gospel and that it was spoken against everywhere in the world. Go to Acts chapter 28 and verse 21. Acts chapter 28 and verse 21. Then they said to him, we neither received letters from Judea concerning you, nor have any of the brethren who came reported or spoken anything evil of you. But we desire to hear from one what you think, for concerning this sect, we know that it is spoken against everywhere. People say bad things about you. because you're living for Christ? People say bad things about your church because that's where you go. You know what the answer is? They spoke against Jesus Christ. They spoke against the Apostle Paul. They spoke against Peter. And I just hope that we are worthy of a little bit of that criticism. You see, even those who do find the narrow way, many of those will not finish the race because the Spirit informs us through Paul. Go to 2 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 2. 2 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 2. And we're going to read verses 2 and 3. Second Timothy chapter 4, verse 2. Preach the word, be ready in season and out of season. Convince, rebuke, exhort with all long suffering and teaching. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but according to their own desires, because they have itching ears, they will heap up for themselves teachers. That's what Paul had to say. What did he say? The people will seek teachers who will tell them what they want to hear, not what the word of God has to say. Go to 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 2, and let's see what Peter has to say. 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 2. And many will follow their destructive ways, because of whom the way of truth may be blasphemed. Wait a minute. So Paul said what? That the people will seek for themselves teachers with itching ears. And Peter tells us what? He says that people will cause the word of God to be blasphemed. Now, Jude, the half-brother of Jesus, also brings our attention to a significant historical precedent. What does that mean? An example that came before, because due to their lack of faith, many of the people whom God freed from Egyptian slavery were later condemned. Go to Jude, verse 5. Jude, verse 5. Jude is that last little book just before you get to the book of Revelations. But I want to remind you, though you once knew this, that the Lord, having saved the people out of the land of Egypt, afterward destroyed those who did not believe. Wait a minute, who got freed from slavery? All of them. In fact, I'll be teaching a lectureship on leadership. Do you know that Moses was a failure as a leader? Think about this. How many people were freed? Over 1 million from Egyptian slavery. How many entered the promised land? 2. If you start off with 1 million man march, and by the end of the march, you're left with 2, would you call that success? Judging from the world standard, the answer is absolutely not. Now, what we tend to forget, what we do not remember, however, is the Bible tells us that we have lots of tools at our disposal to help us to avoid the temptation, to help us keep from falling away. Go to 1 John chapter 4. 1 John chapter 4. And verse 4. 1 John chapter 4, verse 4. You are of God, little children, and have overcome them, because he who is in you is greater than he that is in the world. He that is in you is greater than he that is in the world. Go to James chapter 4. James chapter 4. And verse 7. Mary Faye, move back one and help. James chapter 4, verse 7. Therefore, submit to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. So, what does First John tell us? He that is in us is more powerful than he that is in the world. What does James tell us? If you resist the devil, he will flee from you. I want you to think back in your own life and listen to what this actually has. Have you ever been tempted to sin? Yes. Have you ever resisted the temptation? I hope so. But when you do resist, 30 minutes later, are you still tempted? No. You just resist the temptation for a short period of time, and Satan will leave you be. Go to Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 15. Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 15. Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 15. Having shod your feet with the preparation of the gospel of peace, what do we have to do? We have to get ready to defend our faith with the gospel. Is there any power in the gospel? The answer is yes, but how much? Let's let 1 John chapter 5 tell us. 1 John chapter 5. 1 John chapter 5, verse 4. For whatever is born of God overcomes the world, and this is the victory that has overcome the world, our faith. Stop. What overcomes the world? Our faith. Now, verse 5. Who is he who overcomes the world? But he believes that Jesus is the Son of God. That's not hard. Hold on to your faith. Hold on. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. Go ahead and go to Hebrews chapter 11. Hebrews chapter 11. We'll spend some time there. When faith operated, Abraham left a comfortable home where his father was apparently a wealthy man and headed out on an unknown journey on foot from 1,000 miles away. If somebody were to start you, what is the southernmost province on the island of Luzon? What's way down there? What's that? South of Batangas. Palawan. If they tell you to start in Palawan and start going north, and when you reach the water up on the very tippy top of the island, you're halfway there. And you're going, where are you going? You don't know. What's going to be there when you get there? You don't know. You just know that God told you to do it. That being said, let's look at Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 8. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to the place which he would receive an inheritance. And he went out not knowing where he was going, walking 1,000 miles. 1,000 miles is roughly 1,500 kilometers. You better bring some spare shoes, right? You're probably going to wear out the ones you started with. You see, what about Noah? When Noah obeyed and built an ark, what do you think his neighbors said about him? He's building a boat 300 feet long in his yard. If somebody started building a boat 300 feet long in your neighborhood, would somebody else start talking about it? Yes. Oh, great. He's building a boat. I'm glad he is. I wonder what the boat's for. I wonder what's going to happen. Noah continued building that boat for 90 years. 90 years he spent building a boat, and his neighbors are probably, Noah, what's the boat for? Because you have to remember, at that time in human history, it never rained. The grass was watered. We had a different environment. That never, oh, well, I'm building it in case when the big storm comes and it floods, because all the water is going to fall out of the sky. Really? That's what you need a 300-foot boat for? You know that they were talking about him. You know they were ridiculing. You know they were making fun of him. But let's read verse 7, Hebrews chapter 11. By faith, Noah, being divinely warned of things that had not been seen, say that again, had not yet seen, moved with godly fear, prepared an ark for the saving of his household, by which he condemned the world and became an heir of righteousness, which is according to faith. Okay, so Noah built an ark. What about Moses? He had all the comfort. He was known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He was the grandson of the king. He had comfort, he had power, he had political power, and he had all the riches that the kingdom of Egypt could give him. And that did not stop him from fulfilling God's wish. You're in Hebrews chapter 11. Let's read 24 and 25. By faith, Moses, when he became of age, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. I don't hear anybody else reading. Choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin. We fail sometimes. But Moses did not fail. Just think about all the people you see listed in Hebrews chapter 11. That chapter is called Faith Hall of Fame. And they always stayed true to God. Not only when they were faced with huge challenges, but also when they were outnumbered in terms of faithfulness and obeying God. How many people in Jericho supported the people of God, the Israelites, when they came knocking? And the answer is one, and her name was Rahab. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 331. By faith, the harlot Rahab did not perish with those who did not believe when she had received the spies with peace. What about David and Goliath? How many men in the army of Israel were willing to fight Goliath? And the answer was none. How many people of Israel actually did fight Goliath? And the answer was one. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 32. And what more shall I say? For the time would fail me to tell of Gideon and Barak and Samson and Jephthah, also David and Samuel of the prophets. What is the power? Matthew chapter 5, verse 8 gives us the power. Matthew chapter 5 and verse 8. When the pages quit, you all got there. Matthew chapter 5, verse 8. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. In fact, when one determines to be of pure heart, nothing can stop them from seeing God. We see this demonstrated in Revelations chapter 12 and verse 11. Revelations chapter 12 and verse 11. Revelations chapter 12 and verse 11. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they did not love their lives to the death. So what is the vulnerability of our enemy? You got to remember, Goliath was 9 feet tall, and he showed up in a battle, and he was, most of them, people considered him to be an opponent with no weaknesses, who simply could not be defeated. He was a massive 9 feet tall, clothed in armor from head to foot. Just the weight of his armor was approximately 70 kilos, 135 pounds. That's his armor. Can anybody here carry around 70 kilos for a long time? Go to 1 Samuel chapter 17. We'll stay there for a little while. 1 Samuel chapter 17. First Samuel chapter 17, verse 5. He had a bronze helmet on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. People looked at him, and they saw what they thought was an unbeatable opponent. Yet many did not see that day was he was such a fearless warrior. If he's such a fearless warrior, why does he need a shield bearer? 1 Samuel chapter 17 and verse 7. Now the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his iron spearhead weighed 600 shekels, and a shield bearer went before him. Wait a minute. I'm 9 foot tall. I have on 135 pounds worth of armor, and I need somebody else to carry the shield for me? Really? You're that fearless, are you? You see, he was big. But big can also mean slow. And Goliath came to meet David, but David had a different answer. 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 48. Verse 48. Probably going to have to turn the page. Read it with me. When the Philistine arose and came and drew near to meet David, David ran quickly towards the battle line to meet the Philistine. You see, Goliath was clothed in armor. However, he had one problem. He had left his forehead exposed. 49. Then David put his hand in his bag and took out a stone, and he slung it and struck the Philistine in his forehead, so that the stone sank deep into his forehead, and he fell with his face on the earth. Goliath was prepared for a hand-to-hand battle that relied on brute strength, but he had no defense for David's assault. Above all, God had been angered by Goliath, and anyone who is not right with God is very vulnerable. Therefore, in this instance, Goliath's self-assurance, his arrogance, his size, his weight, his prior hand-to-hand fighting experience and training, and the other attributes were honestly more of liability than an asset. We have many resources from God. God designed the church so that every local congregation will be self-governed and self-determined. Go to 1 Peter chapter 5. 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 1. First Peter chapter 5 and verse 1. The elders who are among you, I exhort, I who am a fellow elder and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, and also a partaker of the glory that will be revealed. Verse 2. Shepherd the flock of God which is among you, serving as overseers, not by compulsion, but willingly, not for dishonest gain, but eagerly, because we don't have a man-made hierarchy, because there is no bishop that needs to approve what we do. We're a smaller body. We can move, we can adjust, we can adapt to the spiritual battle quickly, while much larger organizations in the world have to go through all kinds of channels and steps and red tape before they can adjust. If we wanted this week to move the worship service to 11 o'clock, you know what we'd have to do? Hey, everybody want to move to 11? Okay, cool. Next week we meet at 11. But do you think the Catholic Church or the Presbyterian Church or the Anglican Church or the INC, or just go down the list, do you think they could move their meeting time by an hour just because they wanted to today? No, we have the ability. Why? Because everybody who governs this church is sitting in the room, right? It's just us. The evangelism is simple. It's a simple product. Word of mouth can move a lot faster. Relationships with other people can move. If we can have more success than huge programs that often end up costing a lot of money and resources, our faith and our holiness has a purifying effect on some people that arrive in our circle. Such qualities draw the people in who are sincere and sincerely seeking God. However, it tends to repel those who have ulterior motives. This is true in our lives and in our church as well. When people come here and they see how serious we are about worshiping God, about serving God, about studying his word, those who, what I used to call undercover Christians, are they interested in that type of a relationship with God? And the answer is no. They will come and they will go. We're not wasting a lot of time and energy in fields that will not ever produce fruit. The world continues to provide our children a list of human examples of how not to live. We're not the only ones preaching against the dangers of drugs, alcohol, extramarital sex. The news provides many examples of how wrong this can go. God provides us with a network that keeps us mentally and emotionally and often physically healthy. Time in the Word of God, daily prayer to God, spending time with Him helps us to draw people in who are truly seeking a relationship. 1 Peter chapter 5. 1 Peter chapter 5. And we'll read 7 and 8. Wait a minute, make sure everybody's there. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 7 and 8. Casting all of your care upon him, for he cares for you. Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Our close Christian friends, our godly parents and grandparents, a godly mate will all help us to stay alert. It'll help us to stay mentally sharp. It'll help us to stay encouraged, and it'll prevent us from constructing our own mental world that is not in sync with reality. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 14. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 14. Now wait till everybody gets there. Sorry about that. First Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 14. Now we exhort you, brethren, warn those who are unruly, comfort the faint-hearted, uphold the weak, and be patient with all. Be patient with some of them. No, it's not what it says. Be patient with all. Is it always easy? Absolutely not. However, when we look around and we see the world, then it's not what we might think it should be. When we go to work or we go to school and we feel outnumbered, when we go to our neighborhood meeting and we're the only ones not getting drunk, when we are in the world and it looks like we're outnumbered, just remember, God has your side. Now,